All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for taking this time out of your week to focus on what I believe is the most important thing that we will ever be allowed to focus on in our lives. And that is the growth of our soul, the increasing awareness of the presence and the activity of the divine within us. Every once in a while, I get a little glimpse in my studies and my readings of different definitions of what the soul is, what our soul is. Perhaps more properly we can say what we are, because the soul is our true identity. And you'll hear things like the soul is the point where God becomes individualized as you and I. And one I read this week that just kind of grabbed me again, and I know I've read it before, but every once in a while I come across it and it just kind of shakes me, and you just can go, yeah. And I'd like you to consider that what we are, what you and I are, what all people are, is a center of life where God is celebrating itself as you. It is discovering through a new set of eyes, it's discovering its own magnificence in some unique and wonderful way, you know. I know you've heard people talk about when they first become parents and they have children, and they talk about the wonder of seeing the world again through the eyes of an infant. You know how fresh and exciting life is to a child. A tiny piece of paper and a crayon is a whole new world to them. You know, a little cardboard box is just a castle or a spaceship or a house. You know, and that's kind of living vicariously. That's kind of, we see it and it touches our heart and it amuses us. But we're not really living as that child, you know. We're observing that child. But consider what it would be like to be actually living and expressing and discovering life brand new all over again. And I invite you to consider that what we are is a point of expression, an individualized expression of God that is discovering and celebrating and enjoying its own creation through the uniqueness of our individualization. Each one of us perceives things differently. Each one of us experiences things differently. Some of us like to hear things. Some of us like to see things. Some of us like to touch things. Some of us like to understand things. And all of this to me is the divine, which is unity expressing itself through multiplicity. But in fact, there's only one. In fact, there's only one. To me, that's what growing our soul is all about. It is growing in the conscious awareness of the direct experience of the divine contact. That's something that came from a treatment Dr. Holmes wrote. The conscious awareness of the direct experience of the divine contact. We don't have to go anywhere. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to fast for 40 days and 40 nights. We can do all those things if we're guided to do those, but we don't have to do those, because doing those things will not force us to have the experience that we're not ready to have. But going within, and by going within, I mean within our consciousness. I don't mean physically going inside of our bodies, and God is no more inside our body than outside our body than through our body. Omnipresence. By going within, I mean turning our consciousness away from the external. The five senses all look outward, but the most important sense looks inward. I was reading something this week in Joseph Campbell. We had a book, one of Joseph Campbell's books on the bookshelf probably for 15 years, and just glanced through it every once in a while, and I finally decided to pick it up and read it. And it's just amazing how things that kind of mull over in my mind, things that I've been thinking about, things that I've been trying to find a perfect way to express it so that I can understand it. And Campbell writes something that was written 4,000 years ago. He's quoting something 4,000 years ago where somebody very wise expressed it. But what they were saying is something that I've been saying, is our Western culture, our Western mode of thinking, our science, our materialism is more concerned with observing what's out there and really hasn't taken time to consider who is the one observing. And there it was, written down 4,000 years ago by some Chinese sage in some of the earliest writings, saying exactly the same thing. It's not until we decide to discover what is within, by taking the same diligence, if you will, the same attention to detail that we spend looking out without and going within and saying, who am I? Who is the one who is thinking? Who is the one observing the thoughts? All of these deep things. So what I wanted to talk about a little bit today, what this kind of comes to is, we in our society, in the world, we use words and we don't necessarily stop and think about the fact that perhaps there's a different meaning or a different definition to the word than the one that we've been using. And we all kind of use the words together, and it's as if we agree on the meaning and the definition, and we don't. The same word means many different things to many different people. And one of those words, which is very important in the growth of our soul, is faith. Now, virtually every religion talks about faith, but are they talking about the same thing when they were talking about faith? We sing about faith. We hold hands and sway and sing about faith. We write about faith. Preachers preach about faith. But what is it that we mean by faith? And why is it even important to us? And if we come to some agreement within our own consciousness, we come to some kind of agreement as to why it might be important and what it really is, and the next obvious questions are going to be, well, can it be developed? Or do we have to just be born with it? Is it something that you just have to have when you get here? So those are the kind of things that we want to talk about today. And what I'm really doing is I am inviting each and every one of us to take time to explore this. What does faith mean to you? What do you mean by faith? Why is it important? Is it something we should even give consideration to? Is it something we should even concern ourselves with? Something we should try to develop? So I want to start with, at the beginning, I want to start with why it's important. It's the old, when we were doing presentations and training, we always start with the WIIFM, what's in it for me? If you want to get your audience engaged, they have to understand why sitting through the lecture, the workshop, is going to be of benefit. So let's start right with that. When we consider, we've been talking for the last 2 months, we started at the basics and we've been going through, but pretty much all the time, one way, shape, or form, what we're talking about is The principle that it is done unto you according to your belief. It is done unto you according to your belief. And perhaps that can be even more precisely stated by saying it is done unto you according to your faith. And in fact, in the New Testament, Jesus uses that in those terms. According to your faith, it has been done unto you. So we go back to Proverbs, we go back to the Old Testament, and there's a line in there, I put it in the email last night, there's a line in there that I think sums it up perfectly. It says, keep with all diligence, keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Keep the matters of your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Everything in life, everything that happens in our life, issues from the matters of the heart. And I think that's an even more precise way than saying according to your faith it has been done unto you. Because if you stop and think about faith, it's kind of an ambiguous term. But when we say the matters of the heart, now you have to get in and ask, what do I mean by that? Because that's even more ambiguous. See, with faith, it's ambiguous, but we think we know what it means. With the matters of the heart, we say, I'm not certain that I know what that means. What are the matters of the heart? So let's explore that just a little bit before we get into different definitions of faith and how we might develop it if we decide that that's something that we want to do. So notice that it says, keep with all diligence. Keep with all diligence the matters of the heart. Now, what do we think the Scripture is trying to tell us about the heart? What do we mean by that? And usually, what we come to in interpreting metaphysically, in interpreting the Bible, is when it's talking about the heart, it's talking about feeling and emotion, and it's also talking about the subconscious mind. Now, we are an interesting species in that we seem to be divided amongst ourselves and against ourselves. There's a part of us that knows and won't tell the part that's aware. Won't tell the part that's awake. You ever try to remember a phone number that you know? I know that phone number. I've called that phone number 1 million times. I know it's in there somewhere, but I can't remember it. And the harder we try, to make that phone number come back, it just seems to go away. It seems to be hiding, playing with us. And then when we least expect it, we go off and we do something that I give up. I'll look it up when I get home. We turn our attention to something else. We start paying attention to something completely unrelated, and then boom, the phone number pops back into our conscious awareness. Well, where was it? Where did that phone number go? Was it out there somewhere in the cloud? And then it came back to us, or was it in part of our consciousness, but below a level of conscious awareness? Subliminal, below the level of awareness. It was there. There was a part of us that knew it. There was a part of us that was aware of it, but there was a part of us that was not consciously aware of it. So this is kind of the way that in psychology and psychiatry, you read Jung and you read Freud and these different people, they talk about, it's as if we have two minds operating. And of course, Dr. Holmes tells us there's not two minds. There's only one mind, and it operates two different ways. And we talk of it as if there were two minds because it makes it easier for us to understand. But I think we have to get over that idea into believing that there's two minds. There's only one mind. And there's different parts of it. But my point here is that we know that there is a part of our own consciousness that knows things, that is aware of things, that conducts its business with some sort of logic and reason, and it has a profound impact on the way that we live our lives. And it does this all without our conscious awareness. All without our conscious awareness. And this would be what you might call the subconscious mind, or metaphysically you might call it the heart. It is that which we think and we believe and we feel, and we don't even know it at a conscious level. We can't express it. There's no words to express it. There's no way that we can go in there and get a handle on it, There's kind of code words that we use that talk about. We talk about what we hold dearly, or what our deepest values are, those kind of things, I remember after the attacks on 9/11, which were very close to us. I had worked downtown New York in the building next to the towers. I was there when they were digging the hole to put them up. We have friends and relatives who worked in those buildings. And I remember after the building came down, they were hauling the rubble off over to a landfill in Staten Island, Fishkill. And there was a gentleman whose house was right on the way, and just truck after truck after truck of debris from the towers was going by. And he had this huge American flag across the front of his house, hanging from his front porch. And the TV crew stopped and asked him, why he hung the flag out like that. And of course the poor man was shaken. He was visibly upset. And all he could say was, everybody needs to fly the flag. Everybody needs to fly the flag today. He couldn't express what it meant to him. He couldn't verbalize it. But you could see by looking at him that flag was a symbol of something so deep within him that he felt that everybody ought to be feeling what he was feeling, and that if they would participate in displaying the flag, that somehow they would be expressing whatever it is that he was expressing. And of course, each person who might do that would likely be expressing something different and feeling something different. So my point is that what we feel in what the Bible calls our heart is so deep within us that the conscious awareness, the intellect, can't really get a handle on it, can't really express it, can't really describe it, but it's there. You see, it's there. And then, of course, when you consider what Carl Jung told us about the collective unconscious, which Ernest Holmes described as race consciousness, is that at that level, we're all connected. At that level, all of humanity is connected. And there are thoughts and beliefs and emotions that we may get to experience that are not even uniquely ours, that somehow we are tied into this collective consciousness. And yet these things have a way of influencing our lives, determining our behavior. Why do people act the way they do? Why do they do the things that they do? As you think and believe your heart, so it is, it tells us in another place in Proverbs. It's done unto you according to your belief. It's done unto you according to your faith, is what we are told in the New Testament. In Buddhism, we're told everything you experience is a result of your thought. And there's two parts to that, right? One is the causation part, and then the other is that what we perceive, what we selectively perceive, what we take in from what we're seeing and hearing, is filtered through what we believe. So we're constantly creating this this environment around us that is a perfect outpicturing of what we believe in our heart. And this is so, as we said in January, we went back to the basics, this is so because there's a power in the universe that responds to us according to our belief. The universe that we live in is a mental system. The activity of spirit is thought. And when spirit says, let there be, that is the intention or the declaration. Something acts upon that which we call the law of mind, which is intelligent, which knows what to do, but doesn't decide what to do. It needs to be set in motion, and then it does it. So we're told, keep with diligence the matters of the heart, the matters of the feeling and the subconscious, the matters of your deepest beliefs. Keep them with diligence. And of course, what is diligence, Diligence is we're constantly on it, right? That which is diligent is ever observant. It's not kind of just paying attention here and paying attention there and then going back to sleep. Right? It is diligent. It is constantly paying attention. It is constantly aware. It is constantly observing. It does what it's supposed to do. It does what it is required to do, that which is diligent. When we're in business, when a company is about to take over another company, they send in a team of people to do what is called due diligence. Due diligence. We have to go in there and find out if this company that we're thinking about buying, are they cooking the books? Are they hiding an exposure, a liability that they're not telling us about? Once had a gentleman come to Raleigh, and he was from Lithuania, and this was a few years after the Berlin Wall came down, and after they're going through a great turmoil in Eastern Europe, and he was the director of a telecommunications factory in Lithuania, and they were desperate. They were losing. Their former customer was the Soviet Union, and that Soviet Union didn't exist anymore. And he was trying to find somebody to come and buy his factory so he could keep his people employed, and they could stay in business and find some way to stay in business manufacturing equipment. And a mutual friend introduced him to me, and I found a gentleman in our company, excuse me, who had been in Europe setting up manufacturing operations for us. And we arranged a meeting in a coffee house. And my friend was trying to explain to this gentleman, he says, nobody's going to come in and buy your factory. He says, no Western company is going to come in and buy your factory. He says, they might lease it, they might come to some type of an agreement to purchase whatever it is that you make. He says, but for a Western company to go in there and buy that factory, they suddenly become liable for everything on that property, toxic waste, whatever the previous owners had done. He says, so they're just not going to do that. It would cost too much money to go in and do a survey to find out what all the risks are. He says it would be better for them to just go build a new factory somewhere from the ground up so that they know exactly what they're dealing with. That's due diligence. Before you go in and take over something like that, you have to make sure you've looked under every stone, you've turned every corner, you've dotted every I, you've crossed every T. This is what we're talking about. Keeping with diligence the matters of the heart, because out of it are the issues of life. So this is why faith is important, because faith is really what we think and believe in our heart. Faith is what we know, what we absolutely know. Ernest Holmes gave us the definition of faith. He said, faith is a knowing so certain so certain, that an idea to the opposite could not enter your consciousness. And I really like that definition, because usually when we think about faith, we think about, well, faith is something that I believe in, but there's really no reason for me to believe in it. I mean, I don't have objective facts and data. I can't weigh it, I can't touch it, I can't measure it, but I believe it to be so. And that's typically the way that our society thinks of faith. And of course, because it's really an opinion, right? It's just a matter of opinion. There's no hard evidence one way or the other to prove what people have faith in. There's no debate, right? The old axiom that says, in matters of opinion, there's no debate. You can't have a debate. You can't have a meaningful discussion about matters of opinion, because in the end, everybody says, well, but that's my opinion. That's what I believe. And I'm going to stick with my beliefs. You know? So typically the things that we are told that pertain to faith are things that there are no real ways of knowing or measuring or testing in the scientific method, in the method that we're taught in our universities. You know, if I go to the store to buy a 3-pound bag of onions, I pick it up and it says 3 pounds right on the label. You know, there's a certain amount of trust. I trust that it probably weighs 3 pounds because of labeling laws and because of government agencies and things like that. But if I want to be sure, all I have to do is put it on the scale. You know, I can take that 3-pound bag and I can put it on the scale. Now, there's a certain amount of faith when I'm just looking at it and I think that it weighs 3 pounds. When I put it on the scale and the needle goes to 3 pounds, give or take a little bit, goes to 3 pounds, well, then I know. See, then I know. It weighs 3 pounds. But we don't have a way of measuring faith. We don't have a device like a blood pressure cuff that we can put on your arm and pump it up and say, oh, yeah, well, this is how much faith you have in a particular subject or particular topic. We don't have that tangible way of measuring it. So typically in our society, we are taught, you know, don't get into discussions about religion because there's no way to prove anything anyway. All you're going to do is wind up in getting into an argument over who's right and who's wrong. And of course there is no right and wrong because it's a matter of opinion. It's relative. It's all a matter of opinion. But Dr. Holmes took it to a different level. And he said, nope, he said, faith is a knowing so certain that the opposite idea cannot enter into your mind. He gave us a different definition of faith. And I think it's very important that we understand that definition of faith as opposed to the faith that says, well, I hope it's so, I believe it's so, you know, I wish it were so. A wishing, willing, kind of hoping thing that we call faith. To a knowing so certain that it is done, that the idea of the opposite cannot enter our mind. And the example that I use a lot about that, because it's with us all the time, you know, is gravity. Unless you been out partying really hard the night before, you're probably not going to wake up in the morning and wonder if gravity is still working. You go pour coffee in your cup, you're not going to wonder if it's going to float out of the cup like you see in the movies about outer space. You go to take a breath, you don't wonder if there's going to be enough air in the atmosphere for you to breathe. You know so certainly it is done that the idea to the opposite never occurs to you. It never occurs to you that gravity might not work today. It never occurs to you that there may not be enough air to breathe today. A knowing so certain it is done. But consider where we started. Where is that knowing so certain that it is done? Is it in the intellect? Well, yes. But more importantly, is it in the heart? Do we know at the level of our subconscious mind? Do we know below the level of conscious awareness? Do we believe it in our heart? Do we think and believe it in our heart that it is so? And that's where we have to keep our diligence. That's where we have to observe. That's where we have to pay attention. That's where we have to put our focus. Not in our opinions, not in the fleeting thoughts of the intellect where we say, God is all there is and God is good. And that's okay as far as it goes. But what do we have in here? What do we have in there? So one of the things that we want to consider then is that, yes, faith is extremely important because it is the very stuff and substance of life. Out of it are the issues of life. But it is more than just wishing, willing, and hoping. It is bringing ourselves to, by whatever means possible, education, spiritual practice, community, hanging out with like-minded people, bringing ourselves to a knowing so certain it is done that the idea of the opposite never enters our consciousness. And then Emma Curtis Hopkins, who was one of Dr. Holmes' teachers, she gives us another definition that I think illustrates it even better. She asks us to consider faith to be the confidence to command. And I read that maybe 3 times before I finally stopped and said, the confidence to command, to confidence to command. I had never considered faith to be the confidence to command. What is confidence? Well, confidence is that knowing so certain, but to command, to actually act upon that which we have faith in, to actually act as if, to actually go and do, and to behave according to our faith, consciously according to our faith, consciously. One time when I was working on a project, I was involved in coaching executives in a corporation, kind of helping them to learn how to change themselves so that they could change the corporation. Was maybe the best way I can explain it. And in that role, the company had hired a PhD in psychology, a consultant, to come in. And what he was doing was he was doing psychological profiles on all of the executives. These 16 characteristic psychological instruments that you take, and then it tells you, this is the kind of person you are. These are the things that you like to do. These are the things you don't like to do, all of that. And this gentleman would sit in the various meetings that the executives were in. And these executives I'm talking about, they were like third down from the top. So there was a CEO, there was one person in between them, and then there was them. They were like three levels down from the top of the corporation. And he would sit in and he would observe them. And I worked with the same folks all the time. So I got to see them. And he asked to have a one-on-one with me one time, and in confidence, kind of we shared opinions of the different folks, and it was in confidence because if the word ever got out what you thought about someone, you would probably end your career because they were sure not to like something if you saw any room for improvement. So that was a diplomacy of the job that he had. And we were talking about the different people in the team, and he said, well, what do you think of so-and-so? What is your opinion of so-and-so? And I started to talk about my observations, which were generally favorable, and of course everybody's got, there's some good and there's some room for improvement with everybody. And this gentleman was interesting. He stopped and he said, he said, of all the people in that room, he said, I honestly believe that he is going to be running his own company someday. He's going to be the top person in a company someday. And he said, the reason that I believe that is that he acts as if he belongs. He acts as if he belongs in that room. He acts as if he belongs, as he's supposed to be the one making the important decisions. He says he doesn't hesitate for a minute. Something comes in and he takes in all the facts, he takes in all the data, and he sets his course of action and then executes and implements. He said, and I look for that. I look for that in potential CEOs. Do they act as if they belong? Do they have the confidence to command? Do they have the confidence to command? So what we must consider is that each and every one of us is the executive or the monarch or the emperor and empress of our own lives, you see. Because there's no one else. There's no one else who can change our consciousness for us. There's no one else who can make our decisions for us. Our culture spends a lot of time and wastes a lot of time finding other people to blame, when in fact we're the only ones that can typically do anything about the situation. We have to change our thinking. We have to change our lives. We have to keep with diligence the matters of our heart. We have to be able to do something, to do everything, to do anything that we can possibly do in order to awaken the faith that we were born with, in order to go within and find that knower within that knows so certainly that it can never doubt. You think that the divine doubts itself? Can you imagine going back and reading the book of Genesis and God says, let there be light. And there was light. And God said, wow, how'd that happen? No doubt. There's no doubt in the divine mind. A knowing so certain it is done that it cannot possibly entertain the idea to the opposite. The confidence to command the feeling that we belong. So we have some sense now of why faith is important. It is important because it directs the course of our entire life. We can think that everything in our life is an outpicturing of what we have expressed faith in, consciously, but mostly subconsciously. We have an idea now of what faith is, which is more than a wishing, willing, hoping, or believing in things that can't be proved, into a knowing so certain that the idea to the opposite can't cross our mind, to believing in a willingness or a confidence to command. And now we have to ask ourselves, well, what is it that we know, and how do we develop this faith? And Emma Curtis Hopkins again gives us a very simple definition. She says, what we want to know is the truth. We don't want to know opinions. We don't want to know falsities. We want to know the truth with a capital T, truth. Fenwick Holmes might say we want to know the absolute and not the relative. So here in this plane of existence, everything is relative. But in the absolute, it just is. In the absolute, it just is. I'll give you one example of relative. We all know the commandment, thou shalt not kill. We all understand that. But that hasn't stopped war. That hasn't stopped capital punishment. That hasn't stopped all of the atrocities that human beings do to one another. Because everything's relative. People justify what they're doing. Well, well, that doesn't apply to me, or it doesn't apply to my enemy, or it doesn't apply to this situation. In this situation, it's justified. And yet the commandment says, thou shalt not kill. So in the human experience, in the human condition, everything is kind of subject to opinion and relative. And what Emma Kurz Hopkins says is you don't want to put your faith into that which is subject to change. You don't want to put your faith into that which is frivolous. You don't want to put your faith into opinion. What you want to do is you want to know the truth. I would say you want to know the truth. So certainly that the idea to the opposite cannot enter your mind. And she tells us that we need to examine ourselves, and we need to say to ourselves, well, where is there an idea of a mixture of evil in my idea of good? Do I believe in good, or do I believe in evil, or do I believe in a mixture of both? And our society believes in a mixture of both. And we get this from Zoroastrianism, predates Christianity. That's where the idea of a prince of light and a prince of darkness came from. And this eternal struggle that goes on between good and evil that is going to culminate in the final battle where good eventually wins the Armageddon, the second coming, all those things. That was the idea that came to us from Persia, and it infiltrated Judaism after the Babylonian exile. It came forth to us in Christianity. And Emma Kurz Hopkins says, no. There's no mixture of evil and God. God is all there is. There's no absence in that which is omnipresence, which means all of the good that God is everywhere present. All of the wisdom that God is everywhere present. We tend to think of certain people as being evil, or certain people as being ignorant. And we have to catch ourselves, you see, because that is an idea, a belief in our heart that we need to watch with diligence. And we need to stop and say, there is no mixture of evil in my idea of good. That idea is wrong. I let it go. If we think that those people of the other political party or whatever other group we're talking about, if we think that somehow they are not gifted with the intelligence of God, we need to stop ourselves and say no. There is no idea of lack or absence in my idea of omniscience. All of the intelligence of God is right there and right now. So we need to keep bringing ourselves, every chance we get, we need to keep bringing ourselves back into this deeper definition of faith, this deeper idea of what we are really doing is we are not developing more faith. Right? We can't make God any more than God already is. But what we are doing is we are releasing and we are letting go of every and any idea in consciousness, in our subconsciousness, in collective consciousness. We are releasing and letting go of every and any idea that is unlike faith, that would serve to create the experience of limiting faith. So how do we develop it? We know what it is. We know why it's important. How do we develop it? Number one, we can do it with community. We can hang out as we're doing right now. We can hang out with like-minded people, because faith has a sense of contagion about it. If you're around a group of people who believe, you find it easier to believe. So by association, what kind of books do you read? What kind of talks do you listen to? What kind of audio tapes? What kind of music do you listen to? What kind of movies do you watch? All those kind of things. Association. Do you look to hang out with optimistic people? Do you look for people who truly believe what they believe and hang out with them? That's one thing we can do. The other thing that we can do is we can read and we can study and we can bring ourselves to this sense of belonging, to this sense of confidence to command. And to me, this is the easiest way to do this. There is a power in the universe that responds to us exactly according to our belief, whether we use it consciously or not. Raymond Charles Barker said, we are something unique. We can use intelligence in an unintelligent manner. That's what we human beings can do. There is a power in the universe that responds to us exactly according to our belief, whether we are using it consciously or not. We are already commanding it, but we are doing so unconsciously. It is creating the circumstances and the conditions of our lives. So it only makes sense that if it's going to respond to us, whether we choose wisely or not, that we might as well start choosing wisely. We did not create the law. We did not create the system. Buddhism tells us that. We didn't create the system. We just kind of awakened one day and realized we were in it. This is the way the universe works. We are part of it. We cannot escape our responsibility to choose. God is not going to do for us what God created us to do, which is to make a decision and to choose for ourselves. So if we go down that line of reasoning, we get to the point of saying, I have no choice. I have no choice about whether or not the law of mind is going to respond to me as I think and believe in my heart. This is why you're told, keep with diligence the matters of the heart, because out of it the issues of life come, because the law of mind is responding to you exactly according to your faith. So you have no choice. You're not trying to manipulate the universe. You're not trying to make God do anything that God wouldn't already do, that God hasn't already done. What you are trying to do is bring yourself into conscious and subconscious alignment with the way the truth is. That's all we're trying to do. We belong. We are confident to command. And then the last suggestion, there's just 3 suggestions. Hang out, association. Hang out with people in consciousness who think alike. Read, study, contemplate, bring yourself to the realization that you are already doing it, so you might as well do it consciously. And then the third is to do it. You actually have to do it. You actually have to find a way to go in and to start to release limiting ideas about some aspect of your life and then watch the changes take place. Right? You have to see it. You have to see the results. In the New Testament and then for thousands of years after, it has been this discussion about faith without works is dead. Of course, people that get into that argument are talking about something entirely different than what I'm talking about. But the way Emma Curtis Hopkins puts it is if you think you believe something and it's not outpicturing in your life, then your faith is dead. You really don't believe it. So if you're constantly reminding yourself that you live in an abundant universe and supply is plentiful and everything that is appropriate in your life comes to you easily and effortlessly, but when you look in your checkbook, that's not what you see, then there's an opportunity to grow there, right? There's not an opportunity to beat yourself up. There's just an opportunity to grow, to say, well, I know it intellectually, but maybe I haven't moved it down into my heart yet. How can I continue to do that? And we use treatment. That's what the whole process of treatment is about. We treat to know that the truth that is within us is now revealing itself to us and through us and as us. So this week as you go forward, I invite you, pay attention to what's going on in your life. Keep with diligence the matters of your heart. Keep with diligence, pay attention to the issues of life. What's going on in your life? And is what is going on in your life, is it an outpicturing of the truth as you intellectually know the truth to be? Omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence. That's the truth. And when you see that there's something disjointed there, that what's outpicturing is not necessarily what you know to be the truth intellectually, then what you have to just recognize is, well, then there's something in my heart, something in my emotions and my unconscious that are not yet aligned with the truth. Use the tools in your spiritual toolbox. Use treatment. Use affirmation. Use visualization. Use meditation. To allow whatever is down in there that is not aligned with the truth to go. Bless it. Let it be on its way. So every day, just a little bit more every day, a little bit more today than yesterday, a little bit more tomorrow than today, every day can we live our life out picturing more and more and more of the absolute truth, of omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence, with no mixture of evil, with no mixture of lack, with no mixture of absence. But God is all there is. In me, as me, and through me, and through each and every other person. Can I recognize that in doing so, that universal spirit which we call God, that has individualized itself as us, to celebrate its life, to discover its life as us, is discovering more of itself as us. Each day we grow more. Each day we know more of the truth. Each day we diligently keep the matters of our heart and the issues of life get better and better. And so it is.